hello to everyone on the call. Firstly, we're glad that you can join us tonight, despite the COVID limitations and this crazy situation that we find ourselves in. So welcome. I'm Tilly, and above me, possibly, you'll see Lily. If this is your first time listening in, then welcome to Model Westminster. We are a society intent on just increasing political literacy among students and getting more students involved in the world of politics. Our membership is £5 for the whole year, which is an absolute bargain, as we've got lots more events, such as this fantastic one that you're joining us for right now. We've got speaker events, discussion forums, and possibly some in-person events coming up soon, but this is obviously guild guidance depending. We'll also be getting some members stash, ideally before Christmas, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. And we're also just very friendly and always open to new members, so who could want more reasons to join? So we are in the closing days of Black History Month, a month that celebrates Black people and their achievements, and through that celebration, a month in which we can all learn more about Black history. We're aware that a lot of the Black history that certainly Lily and I and some of the people watching might be aware of is quite American-centric. And like Lily and I, many of you will be wanting to learn more about the Black British experience and its intersections with politics. So we're making it our goal to expose you all to more Black British history, as there is an abundance of it. In light of this, we are joined by a very special guest. She is an activist, former councillor and businesswoman. Let's give a huge welcome to Linda Bellos. Hi, Linda. Thank you for joining us this evening. Hopefully we won't be keeping you too long. How are you doing? How has the post-lockdown period been for you? What have you been up to?
It's been okay. Yeah, I think okay. I work in the morning, as in I write in the morning, and I am not going out as much in the afternoon and the evening. In fact, I'm not going out at all, except I've just gone and had my hair cut for you.
It looks lovely.
Well, it took about 15 minutes because I go to a wonderful Caribbean man in town. So I jumped in the car, drove into town, found a parking space, got my hair cut, and all within about 40 minutes, which isn't bad.
Wow. Yeah, that's not bad at all.
No, it was very good.
Especially with the parking situation in the UK.
And there was hardly any parking. There was hardly any cars parked because everyone is
staying at home.
Most people are staying at home and doing what you can go into town to get some things that you need. I mean, I can't cut my own hair.
No, me neither.
I think he's done a pretty good job, and I should probably be there next week as well because my hair grows. African hair grows fast in the winter to keep us warm.
Interesting. I never knew that.
On that basis. Yeah.
Right. So we'll recap how the event is going to run. So we'll ask you a few questions about your political background and insights that you might have on race relations. And throughout the discussion, any questions that we get from our viewers who are students will be directed to you as well, rather than just having questions at the end. Because I know you want to talk primarily about what the viewers want to know from you, what students want to hear. Is that fine with you?
It is absolutely fine, but can I start with Black History Month? Because
yes.
Because I'm responsible for it being in Britain in October each year. It wasn't my idea, but I was the chair of what was it called? London Strategic Policy Unit. Nobody's ever heard of it, but it was the body that took over from the GLC the bits that Margaret Thatcher didn't like. So the ethnic minority unit, the women's unit, of which I was a member, oh goodness me, can't remember all the names of the bits, but one of the officers came to me and with a proposal for Black History Month, I said yes, as long as it wasn't like the American one, because I wasn't and tend not to be a general fan of it, because Black History Month in America is very much about creating or enhancing the black middle class. I remain a socialist, and my primary concern is with the working class. So we created Black History Month then. It carried on for a few years whilst Bernie Grant, another black, he was an MP by then, but he was also a council leader. He also supported and was a great fan. Then it petered out with the politics. Over the years, the politics of the Labour Party in particular have not been, should we say, enhanced in any noticeable way. So Black History Month, bits and pieces were going on, not very political. And then because of Black Lives Matter, and I'm sure it is because of Black Lives Matter, this year, a lot of activities have been going on in the name of Black History Month in October. So they've sort of, you know, the kind of old politics and new politics have come together, and we still don't have resources. I'd quite like to see, I have a proposal that I hope somebody will take up, which is that a government department, I can't remember what it's called because they've moved where equality used to be and put it in somewhere else. But it would be good if the state financed Black History Month with community forming a committee to decide who gets what money, because there won't be a huge amount of money, and I don't think there ought to be, because there are lots of, you know, people are starving but homes need building. So I'm not suggesting that, you know, millions and millions of pounds be spent on Black history, but some money should be there to go to small groups, large groups, state organised activities which celebrate the contribution that Black people have made to this country. Still a necessary cause, and many people don't know or understand the extent to which Black history has been an integral part of British history, certainly since the 14th, 15th, 16th century. So that's my unrequested contribution to Black History Month to you to share with you.
Thank you very much. Before we get much further into the discussion, I think if possible, I'm just going to sort of introduce you, Linda, and explain to our viewers a bit about the very, very busy and interesting life which you have led, and do tell me if I get anything wrong or I've missed anything that you think is very important to join. And also, just before I start that, actually, just to everyone viewing, please do drop in any questions sort of throughout the whole discussion. As we've said, and as Linda has said, you know, we really want this to be as interactive as possible and sort of led by the viewers. But here goes. So Linda was raised in Brixton and graduated from the University of Sussex with a politics degree. In her political career, Linda was the second ever Black woman to become leader of a local authority when she was council member for Lambeth in 1986. She was a key member of the Black sections of the Labour Party between 1984 and 1988, when the number of Black councillors increased from just 100 to 500. Significantly and pertinent to tonight, and of course, as Linda has just explained, Linda was involved with, or sort of authorised, the first Black History Month in the UK in 1987. In 2006, Linda was awarded an OBE for her services to diversity. After taking a short break from professional life, Linda has stepped back into the... Oh, no.
So can I just say that I was very, what's the word? Reluctant to accept the Order of the British Empire, and I consulted 3 people, my daughter, my partner and my brother, and they all said take it. I did. But why on earth do we, this country, still have things about the bloody British Empire? Anyway,
I do often ask myself that. Yeah,
it does beg a question, but it'd be very interesting to get onto that, onto those sort of questions. And I'm sure many of our viewers will have very sort of similar views and quants to yourself. But yeah, so after taking a short break from professional life, Linda stepped back into the field of equality, and with the wealth of knowledge she's amassed from her very varied career and life experiences, she was able to offer a very unique and valuable insights into where we are today, where we're going, and what we can do to improve race relations in Britain. This, of course, has just been a summary, and if I were to mention everything that Linda has done, we probably wouldn't be able to hear from Linda. But as some of you may have heard, Linda is sort of writing at the moment, so hopefully at some point we'll be able to get a much more a considered view of your very, very interesting life. But I'll sort of hand, or is there anything that you want to sort of respond to that summary that I've just given?
I just said what I wanted to say about let's move on. Okay,
perfect. Tilly, over to you. I'm sure we'll come back to the OBE at some point, because I'm sure our viewers will be very interested to hear more about your views there.
So Linda, you've, as Lily has just described, you've achieved many things during your career, despite the sort of racial climate that you grow up in and worked in, and still do work in. We're aware that this country has had a somewhat hostile relationship with race relations, especially since the late 1940s and the arrival of, the Windrush generation, as we were discussing before. If you're comfortable doing so, could you tell us a bit more about your experiences as a young mixed race woman growing up and entering the workforce in Britain? I know you wanted to say something as well about the term mixed race.
Well, look, somebody tell me what a race is. What's a race?
I feel like I'm back in my philosophy lectures. It's a good question, and it's something which I think, as you've picked up on a couple of other interviews and lectures that I've heard you give, it's not really a definable term or a particularly useful one. I don't think.
Well, I certainly am aware that a man called Adolf Hitler was very clear that there was a German race. Lots of people talk about a white race, but then there are people in the white race that I think they would want to exclude. The word race, I can accept a human race, but I don't know, people talk about European race. Well, in the European race, it has the French race. People talk about the French race, the English race, the German race. So even the people who use the term are not clear about it. I'd suggest some more scholarship back into the early 19th century into these notions of races, and particularly they were created, certainly the British version of races sought to defend or at least excuse the taking of millions of people from Africa, enslaving them, Britain gaining huge amounts of wealth out of the enslavement, including cotton, sugar as commodities, which have been and remain quite important in British cultural and economic life. The racists sought to enforce or reinforce these notions of the right to live, the right to life, applied to other people having less right to live or to life. And the British Empire, which is still the order of the British Empire, I'm not happy about it, almost precisely because of the way that the notion of the empire, the exploitation of quite a lot of Africa, quite a lot of the Caribbean, whilst Britain had a role in before they were the United States of America, in taking the north of the Americas, the notions of races was there to justify treating some peoples less favourably. And that's an understatement when I say less favourably.
Mm.
And the reason, therefore, I'm quietly angry about race is that it justifies oppression, it justifies theft of people, the theft of land.
Mm.
So I see myself as a member of the human race. Culturally speaking, my father was African, came from Nigeria. My mother was Jewish. Mr. Hitler had views about the Jewish race. He tried to kill all Jews that he could find. You'll understand, therefore, it's not a joke to me. This is serious political. There are consequences with racializing people. Europeans do it to each other, fighting with each other. They've done it in Central Europe, in the fights between the English and the Welsh. No, sorry, the English and the French. The fights all over, you know, over last in recent centuries, fights between one European group in the name of race. So you'll see why it's not a small, it's not an insignificant matter. We need to know what happened historically. I'm not convinced that you young British women need to be responsible for what your great grandparents, grandfathers may have done. I see you as equal, all of us as being equal. And the notion of race seeks to put some human beings in a position lower than or others in higher than, whereas when I say I am committed to equality, I start with the equality of every human being having the right to live. And I don't want to get bound up in stupid man-made, and I mean made by men, not women, man-made differences that justify why some of us should be seen as less than others. Is that enough?
I think that's very, very interesting. I think you sort of highlighted that the intersection that race can kind of has, and it's just a word which is, I mean, you said it much better than obviously I ever could, but I think so many times we band around these words and we use words, and especially politicians use words possibly without thinking about the implications of those words, but also possibly knowing the implications of those words, but going ahead anyway, knowing the damage that they cause, which possibly in terms of politicians is more likely. But for the general public, at least, you know, hearing people in positions of power use the words and not question them, then leads it to become sort of common discourse, and then that's a really challenging thing to sort of question. But I think it's really important to do so, and you've given a fantastic explanation as to why it's not the term that some people maybe think it is. Tilly, I'll let you get back to the other sort of points.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Linda. And I want to say I completely agree that we all need to. I mean, that's why I asked you the question initially, because I think we all need to be discussing these things and listening. And yeah, thank you for your answer. I appreciate that. So I want to talk to you a little bit about like what got you interested in politics. I mean, watching your TED Talks and stuff, I can see that you're very you're a passionate politician in the sense that you're passionate about what you actually do as a politician, not just about the politics of different things, if that makes sense. So what actually, like, I suppose, drove you towards that career in the first place?
I don't think it was ever a career for me. Politics is an essential part of me. I suppose politics is about seeking to make change. And I have sought to make change for what I consider to be the good. There are people who might seek to make change for themselves and to bolster or defend their family, and that might mean their membership of a party. So what drove me to politics was I want solutions to oppression that don't require us killing each other. Men's responses to whether it's difference or it's fighting, and whether they do it fighting in the House of Commons, and it's not fisticuffs, but it isn't, I don't get a sense of parties listening to each other. They are fighting, in that sense, they're fighting. And what drove me to political solutions is the oppression, the discrimination I experienced as a child. When I think about it now, it's so obscene. Grown men calling me names, and I'm talking about being. I mean, when I was a child, children of all sorts could be out in the street on their own or with each other, but not necessarily having our mothers having to hold our hands. Grown men would shout, if they were in cars or on the street, would call me nigger. And I'm talking about in the 1950s. My father was very, very good at ensuring my brother and I had certain skills. And he taught us both, me included, to fight. Because sometimes I had to I wasn't often defending myself. I was usually defending small boys, small black boys, who would be set upon by white boys, usually older than them. And I could defend myself. I can defend myself. And I did think that I have a definition of actually can't remember the word now. The definition, I think, wisdom. To know when to run from a situation, to know when to talk your way out, and to know when to be able to lift your fists to defend yourself. That's wisdom, knowing which is the appropriate response. So politics to me is about solutions that change the world to be better, to be less oppressive, less exploitative. And I read politics at university. I was a mature student. I already had 2 children when I went to university. And I went to Sussex and I read politics that was fairly broad. I mean, we would talk about lots of, it was very much the parts I was interested in were Marxists, but we did read and explore a range of political thoughts and movements. Rightly, I wanted to do that. I needed to do that. And I was only a politician in the formal sense when I joined black sections in the Labour Party and was encouraged to put myself forward as a councillor, and I became a council leader. I don't think I ever tried to get into Parliament. I wasn't desperately interested in what Parliament, the whole milieu, the whole culture, the history. Some chaps, and now more young women, can do decent things in Parliament. I'm certainly in favour of Parliament. I just don't feel that it would, should we say, draw on my best energies. I chose not to do it. I liked being a councillor, but I didn't want to be an MP. I like grassroots politics, and I like developing the ideas of politics, which I have as a feminist, as a lesbian feminist, as a socialist, as a black woman, as a black person. So there's lots of things, and now going to be in 2 months' time 70 years old. So I've become, I want to be an active old git. I mean, that's meant to make you laugh, but I really mean it. And politics are, I think, very important. They impinge upon our lives. I don't think everybody wants or needs to do it, but I do think that in Britain we need to know more about what the politicians in Parliament are doing, what games they are playing with our resources. I mean, the money that they decide to spend on the army or the navy, the air force, or the this or the that, is actually our money. You know, it's the taxes we pay and have paid, our parents and our grandparents. This is our money, and we have a decent way of making decisions. We have Parliament, we have MPs. That's, I think, fundamentally, it is not a bad system. Practically, it's rubbish, but the principles of what it should be doing are great, and I'm happy to comment on them. But I'm glad I'm not in there trying to do it in the Parliament type way.
Yeah, I think now, I imagine probably everyone in the sort of political career in their time maybe wonders whether that this particular period of time is one of the most challenging. But I think for politics right now, this definitely is an interesting time, to say the least, for a multitude of reasons. I was just wondering if you could maybe tell us a bit more about your time leading the Lambeth Borough Council, and maybe sort of going into any challenges you faced, and either how you overcame them or sort of what came of them.
I really did enjoy my time as leader. It was only 2 years. I stood down. Well, actually, we did, the small group that was the leadership group, the chairs of many of the committees. We didn't know each other, and we existed there. I wouldn't have been the leader of the council had Margaret Thatcher not come up with a great idea of rate capping. I don't know if you've studied any of that period. It was an absolutely bloody waste of time and public money that woman threw down the. The previous Labour administration, Ted Knight, chose not to comply. They were surcharged and disqualified. All the Labour councillors were surcharged and disqualified. I and 2 other councillors who were new, no, one was new, and the other one, because she was a lawyer, had managed to avoid being surcharged and disqualified. She didn't vote in any kind of way that Thatcher and her cohort thought were illegal. So what happened? So there were 3 of us holding the council together legally. We had some way of doing this it was a number of weeks. Then there was the election in March 1986, and Labour won. Margaret Thatcher went on television and broadcast saying how much, how they were going to win, especially in Lambeth, and we got more seats than we had previously. Most of the councillors that came, most of the Labour councillors who came, thought they were just making up the numbers, didn't expect to win, and when we did, and when it came to the sort of internal vote, I put myself forward to be leader. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but the fact is, I had at least read politics at school, at university, had been involved in lots of other political things. So hence I put myself forward. And well, what other questions? What you know now? Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. I'm not sure what that means.
No,
If I go,
I think it's absolutely fine, at
Good,
least on
good.
our end.
Okay.
I was just wondering maybe if you could then also sort of, you've spoken about the councillors sort of standing and thinking that they were just sort of maybe filling seats but weren't actually going to get anywhere, and then I imagine the sort of the shock when they realised what they'd got themselves into.
Right. Quite a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe if you could explain a bit more about sort of what the black sections of the Labour Party, what that actually was, what your role was within that, because obviously increasing the number of black councillors from 100 to 500 is pretty significant. So
Yes.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you where it started for me. I'm not saying this is the beginning, but I think it started with Paul Boateng having put himself forward for a winnable seat in the Labour Party, and I can't remember, it wasn't Hitchin, but it was somewhere in that sort of region, and he was not selected. I think at that point he was a barrister. He was a senior person in the Greater London Council, so he had lots of experience as a barrister, and lots of MPs are barristers and lawyers. And what I think happened was, what I recall, he told us that he wasn't selected because the Labour Party felt that white people wouldn't vote for a black man, which I must say that I still find shocking that that was said then. He and who else? Diane Abbott had also gone for a seat. Another chap whose name I can't remember. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. He was also a Westminster councillor, as Diane was. Had put themselves forward to be MPs in a perfectly reasonable way, as lots of people do. And again, they weren't selected because of the colour of their skin, and this is by Labour. And it was out of that a number of people came forward. I wasn't one of them. I will not claim credit for that. It wasn't my initiative, but I was persuaded to join them. And I must say that I thought it was timely for me to do so. I was active in the women's liberation movement, and it was falling apart about other matters. And so it was a place for my political energies. And so I joined Black Section. So I went to the inaugural meeting in Birmingham. I remember it. And I got persuaded to put myself forward. Oh dear. And I became vice chair of Black Sections at that meeting. And it was out of that I later, only about a year and a half later, I put myself forward as a councillor and then as council leader. So that's that was the outline of how I got to be leader of Lambeth Council through Black Sections. I remained in Black Sections until I did stop being, because the Labour Party then tried to, well, not tried, it said it wouldn't recognise Black Sections, but they could be recognised as a body, I don't know, akin to, we still have women's sections then, so we've still got them now. Women's sections, Black Sections in my mind should have been equal to women's section. And instead was relegated to some other status much lower, and I just thought I couldn't stomach it. Not from what I knew. I mean, I'd been the first black woman to work in Spare Rib magazine. You probably have heard of Spare Rib. I hope you have. Anyway, yeah. You know, I had been active in the women's liberation movement. I knew, and active as in politics and aware of politics, and I could not stand the idea of black people being as it were, relegated, not equal to women as a class of humans. And so I, well, what did I do? I left black sections because they accepted this inferior role. My politics didn't change. I just didn't coalesce with a body that I didn't any longer have respect for.
Yeah, I think it's quite maybe it shouldn't be shocking. Maybe that's naive of me to admit that I find that shocking. But you think that when things move forward and something like black sections has had the success that it did, to then see it like sort of degraded rather than given more support,
Yes.
Is very odd. But yeah, maybe that's my naivety and sort of
well,
goodwill thinking.
There was a dreadful politics that I don't know that the leadership of the party at that time understood how to defeat Margaret Thatcher. And I don't think that failing to be socialist is a way to get people to vote Labour. They did think that if they appeared to be just on the left of Margaret Thatcher, that somehow working class people were going to vote for them. And I didn't share that view. And indeed, I was right. I mean, it took a much longer period for Thatcherism to be exposed as the selling off of the wealth of this country, effectively. We need coal mining now and various other things that we need that she sold off. And yeah, I haven't really changed my politics very much in the intervening decades. I'm still a socialist, and I hope, a realist. So I'm not party to some revolutionary party that's not the Labour Party. I mean, we have to do things through the Labour Party, and in that sense, I'm quite, well, you might say middle of the road. But I want to be realistic about a democratic body that is reflective and representative of working class people in Britain. That's my politics. And if I wanted to be merely a lefty making lots of noises, I'd tell myself to grow up.
Yeah, it's interesting you speaking about the Labour Party and kind of the attitude of the leadership towards what was going on at that time. Perhaps I could ask you now to reflect on kind of the current situation of the Labour Party. We've had a question come in. Do you think the Labour Party's rhetoric under both Corbyn and now Keir Starmer has adequately dispelled the historic political myth that class, poverty and ethnicity don't violently intersect and correlate?
Let's just say that last bit again, but in plain English.
Okay. So do you think that the Labour Party's rhetoric under Corbyn and now Keir Starmer has kind of dispelled this historic idea that class, poverty and ethnicity do not kind of have a violent relationship in between them, that they don't violently intersect and correlate?
Well, I think one would have to be perhaps sitting in an ivory tower to think that they didn't. They're not separate tranches of human beings. Some of Black and minority ethnic people have become middle class. Indeed, I know I have, by virtue of going to university. Poverty is still part of society, and it is impinging upon all categories of working class people and black people. We're hearing, even through this epidemic, that the treatment, the pay, the whatever of some groups of medical people are different to others. Well, what's that if it isn't ethnicity? You know, that the politics of Parliament, the things that go on in Parliament, the critique of commentators on, particularly on the Labour Party, is in my mind utterly useless, worthless, made up by chaps who may have gone to bloody university to read politics, but they wouldn't recognize, they've no idea in the main what the bloody hell they're talking about. Class, poverty, ethnicity were the three. As I say, there are overlaps. These are not necessarily cohorts that stand in isolation from each other. Even if some of these commentators think they do, how would they know? How, you know, the clubs they bloody drink in may be, I don't know, well, even the servants. I'll calm down. I'll try and be polite, but I'm not convinced that the people who are asked to comment know what the hell they're talking about. This is not just theory from books. Class is changing, and indeed has always changed. The dynamic of class is the dynamic of capitalism. Poverty it was reducing, and aren't we in a strange position even today with food for children at Christmas? The arguments, and some Tory MPs are now having to say that they agree children should not be starved. So the categories need to reflect. I'm not even sure they do need to reflect. What the hell are the categories? They don't sum up a person or a group of people or a class or a category of humans. There are things happening now, that one young footballer has managed to cause profound questions to be asked of our MPs. I have a serious question. How long will this dingbat, who is our Prime Minister, how long is he going to last? Because I think even his party, the MPs there, knowing that they will not win their seats next time around, may need to get rid of him.
I think the political climate at the moment, especially surrounding the most recent vote on food for children in the holidays, which seemingly is a very simple decision which everyone should agree upon, throws up a multitude of questions surrounding the leadership that we have in this country. And it's shocking and quite disturbing. And also the fact I think the Rashford is about 21 years old as well, and I think
he's 22.
22, so not much older than Tilly and I, and the fact that he's able to do this and stir up this commotion and cause a lot of questioning of the leadership is quite incredible, but also shows that, you know, that there are a lot of holes that can be poked in what we call our government at the moment. To sort of move on the conversation, because I'm aware that you know, it's Black History Month, and that's what a lot of our viewers would want to know more about and want to know your views about. So I was wondering if you could maybe describe or explain what your views are on where Black History Month in the UK is now, and maybe also why you were sort of quite clear in that you didn't want it to follow the American format.
Well, I didn't want it to. I didn't want it to reflect the politics of America, because the politics of Britain, the cultural, social, political, economic history of Britain is different. We need Black History Month because Black people here and in the past have made a positive contribution, and it keeps getting written out of history. Hence the need for Black History Month, and it to be an integral part of British history. That, for me, is a statement of the obvious. Why should Britain fail to include a part of its history? I want Black people who identify as Black, to have a sense of pride when the majority of the culture in which we live sees us wholly in negative terms. And rather than attack them, my view remains, Black people do the research and assert our contribution, historically and currently. I think it is perfectly reasonable, just as the category of women have to do exactly the same thing. I think it was today I was hearing about the contribution. No, I read it in today's Guardian. The contribution of many women in the Second World War. That was always known, but men chose to write it out of the history. And the same is true of the contribution of many people of African and Asian heritage who have made enormous contributions to this country, and it gets denied. It gets written out of history. That's fundamentally wrong. I can't imagine who would try to defend that unless they were fascists. I mean, and I say fascists because fascists don't tend to like Black people, I have noticed. And they are quite capable of ignoring any history, including their own. So let's put them aside. And I don't believe that huge numbers of people in Britain are fascists, are racist. Most white people are not racist. They may act in racist ways because they don't know what racism is. And they've not taught anything about the history of racism, the racism in this country. And it will be useful to know, not so that they can be made to feel guilty. Most of them will not be recipients of wealth through enslavement. But some of our duchies and others have great lands and beautiful houses because of the trade of human beings or in human beings, I should say. So there's lots of history to be known. And I don't think, I'm talking to you two as young people, young women, you are not personally responsible or recipients of the enslavement of millions of people. All of us in this country are beneficiaries of the past. Me as much as you. So I think it's helpful not to play some kind of game in which we try to make others feel guilty. I haven't seen any Black people do that to white people. Taking responsibility is something that the monarchy, the class system that we have has a role to play, but I won't be allocating the I don't know what to say about our royalty. I'm not a royalist, but I have some respect for the Queen. And her eldest son hasn't been too bad at some things either in terms of the environment. So there's quite a lot of things, as I would say. I'm not as I say, I'm not a monarchist. I'm not a great fan of it, but I wouldn't go out of my way to harm the monarchy either. I'm just deeply critical of the institution. It does, I suppose, it brings in a few bucks in terms of, people come to see the Queen and the castles and all that. It's for me, it's not a big deal, and I'm certainly not going to make an issue out of doing harm to other human beings.
Yeah, I think, as you said, critical of an institution, and as I think, we should all be critical and questioning of any institution which has been around for such a long time, sort of regardless of what that is, and the royal family is one of ours. Something which you also picked up on, which I thought was very interesting, was this sort of idea of responsibility or acknowledgement. And I think that was a big question that was sort of raised for a lot of people over lockdown, when there was a rise in the Black Lives Matter protests, both in America and the UK. And it was something that a lot of, I think a lot of extra students, a lot of students across the country, and also just people in general across the UK were starting to wonder what position they held within racism in their country, and within whatever institutions they're a part of, whether that be education or work. And a lot of people were and are still confused and questioning where they sit within that. But I think it's an interesting one to raise, and it's something that it's good to have conversations about, because I think a lot of people are afraid to have those conversations, or unsure about how to have them. I think Tilly's got a question next for you.
Yeah, I just obviously you were kind of talking about our history and Black history, and that being kind of consistently ignored in the writing of British history. I just wanted to ask what your opinions are on the sort of current condition of race relations in the UK, and I guess kind of in light of what you were saying before, how we might go about kind of confronting that history that has been ignored for so long. You mentioned before that you've got this proposal that you're putting forward, but kind of generally speaking, for the everyday person, let's say, what can we be perhaps doing to reconcile that history, I guess?
I think that work needs to happen to support the struggles of white working class people historically. I think that to undertake Black history and present it as a responsibility of all white people is problematic, because as a socialist, I know that many white working class people have suffered, that they've also been encouraged to be at the forefront of hostility to Black people is something I'm also aware of. We have, in general, a joint experience of oppression that some groups are supported against another. Means that we tend to be arguing with each other and leaving our oppressors rubbing their hands. And accruing even more money from the exploitation of our labour, past, present and future. I think I've said it already, but I will say it again, I'm not in favour of violence as a strategy. Knowing one's history, knowing And when I say ones, as I said, I call myself English. Why? Because I was born in England. I know that I don't know as much about English history, the history of England, the things that happened in England, the things that happened in the name of England, then I could. It would be quite good if our universities and our media made evident some of the history that is not made available to us, not in order to facilitate guilt, which, by the way, I find one of the most useless emotions known to humankind. We can wrap ourselves with guilt and then do nothing, as though being guilty was enough. We need to take responsibility of changing the world so that the oppressions that we have experienced and see are no longer respected. So knowing things about ourselves, not in competition. Again, I'm saying this from my wisdom. In the past, I was very keen to see the wrongs be righted, but then who's going to do it? And so I'm not, as a solution, I'm not convinced that that's necessarily helpful. I do see a huge amount of discrimination against categories of human beings. And I do see a cohort of chaps from a particular class who seem to lord it over the rest of us. Well, they'd like it very much if we start arguing with each other. So the answer is we don't do that. We listen and share with each other. And then we find ways of getting the power away from those chaps without violence. Without violence. I'm convinced that physical violence is men's way of doing things. I'm not a man. I don't want to be a man. I want to see the world, and we start with where we are, Britain, in particular, specifically England. I don't call myself British, I call myself English. I have no cultural, historical relationship with Scotland, Wales, apart from living in Cardiff for 3 years. Aside from that, I'm not Welsh. I respect Wales. I respect Welsh people, likewise Scottish people, definitely Irish people. I call myself English because I was born in England. I do find it funny. I don't even notice. One of the chaps who was supporting the British National Party and other, well, he seems to be Irish. He doesn't seem to be English, and I do think he should get himself sorted out in his head. That enough said?
Yes, thank you. And we're recognizing that we've actually just gone over an hour. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. And the time has flown by incredibly quickly, and you're absolutely fascinating and very, very knowledgeable. And I hope all of our viewers have enjoyed this conversation as much as Tilly and I have. I think a few things you just sort of picked up on in that last sort of moment was guilt, which I think is a very interesting one. And as I've been trying to read more and educate myself, not only in terms of those sort of Black Lives Matter and racism and all of that, but also in terms of feminism and sort of intersectional feminism, guilt often comes up as just something which it's almost you can sort of feel it to make yourself feel like you've done something. Oh, I feel bad about this and I've achieved, but actually you're not doing anything. It's not a useful emotion, and it's not helping the people that have been oppressed by whatever you've done or your ancestors have done. And then also working together. I think we see that a lot oppositions will try and create infighting within certain movements, because that will then take up energy which otherwise could have been used to progress a movement. So I think those are two really interesting points. But again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I just wondered if you wanted to let our viewers know anything about where we can find more about you, if you're writing maybe any articles or your book, or anything that we can watch you on or listen to you on in the coming weeks or months.
Well, I am writing what probably is about the 50th version of my memoirs. I've gone back to what I was doing previously in terms of format. I am actually enjoying editing. I want to keep it as short as possible, and I am determined to finish the bloody thing, because I know that I would like to have read the memoirs of other people, and I know I've done some interesting things, and the least I can do is make my journey known, and I'm not expecting to be liked or loved, merely understood. That will be a good outcome for me. So that's what I'm planning to do. I can't bear new technology. I really, I can't. It's all a complete utter mystery. I've got in my hand a pencil. Here's a pen. I really like these. I find them very, very useful. Much better than bloody new technology.
I think a lot of people are coming to those similar conclusions now that we're being forced to use it a lot more. But when you do manage to edit, what I imagine is a huge book, because you've got so much to say and so much history of your life to write about. I'm sure you'll be able to find it in any respectable bookshop.
I get it published first. I got to get it published, and the publishers that I've gone to seem to think that only Black people would be interested. That's utter nonsense, and it's of course it's a form of racism. It's less favourable to,
absolutely.
I know I get invited to do lots of things, etc. But this is not just about me. What we're seeing, and what we've seen in the last few months, is a huge amount of publishing being finally done. Those books have been written years ago, but women and men, Black women and men, haven't been published. Now the publishers are seeing, actually, the readership is more than just Black people. So yeah, it means they sell the books. That's why I'm saying selling the books is what.
That's absolutely absurd. I'm shocked again, maybe out of naivety, that would even be a conversation to have. But I'm sure that once it gets on the bookshelves, it will fly off again. So have you got any closing remarks before we sign off?
Only to thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. It's not the first I've had, but in these days it's good to talk. It's very good to talk. Having students sitting alone worrying about the world is not half as good as being students coming together and talking about solutions, not just describing the problems. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I completely agree. Yeah, well, it's been really fascinating to talk to you, Linda. I feel like I've really taken a lot out of this, and I really cannot wait to get hold of your memoirs. That will be a really exciting read for me. So thank you to everyone for joining us, not just Linda, but everyone that's been watching the live stream. And we'll see you guys at another event fairly soon. Thanks again, Linda.